covering the world of professional wrestling. This is the Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much for tuning into the latest episode of the Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. As always, I greatly appreciate your ongoing support. We've jumped ahead an hour, which means that spring is just around the corner. Spring is really just winter junior when you really think about it up here in the Great White North of Canada. But either way, I'm excited about spring and then summertime. It is much needed. Before we get to what's on tap for this entire episode, if you want to listen to new episodes this Thursday, you can subscribe to The Signature Spot on YouTube. That is youtube.com/The Signature Spot. You can also like and subscribe and listen on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and podcast apps such as Overcast. You can also listen on thegorillaposition.com, a great supporter of the program, as well as thesignaturesspot.com. I'm also all over social media. You can like The Signature Spot on Facebook, follow me on Twitter at Chris Toplack, and follow The Signature Spot on Instagram. Harlem Heat will join the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2019. I'm really excited about this. Easily one of my favorite tag teams from WCW, despite the fact they were totally underutilized, misused, which was the case for about half the roster in WCW. It's a shame they never jumped ship to the WWF back in the day, but this will make Booker T a two-time WWE Hall of Famer. Quite an accomplishment. Very few in that class. Basically, it's Ric Flair all by himself there, I believe. Jushin Thunder Liger has announced that he will retire in January of 2020. This is very special and saddening to me because as a child, I was absolutely fascinated by this man. I still am, and I specifically credit Jushin Thunder Liger for my deep love and appreciation of Japanese wrestling. As a child, I thought it was just so incredible. The way they moved, the way they just executed all of those maneuvers, the way they hit each other. Yeah, it's snug. Jushin Thunder Liger, a true innovator as well, and in my opinion, the greatest junior heavyweight of all time. So before he retires, I'm going to dedicate, at the very least, an entire segment to the career of the great Jushin Thunder Liger. I am going to be at SummerSlam. I took advantage of the pre-sale. I'm going to be there with my better half, Michelle. Looking forward to it. Once WWE NXT TakeOver tickets go on sale, I'm going to take advantage of those too. So to the general public, I believe SummerSlam tickets go on sale as of tomorrow, so get them while you can. Oh, I'm going to be in Toronto that entire weekend, so if you see me, say hello. If you intend on going, perhaps we shall touch base, maybe enjoy a beer together. How about that at Scotiabank Arena? On the program today, we have a lot to get to, by the way. A full recap of WWE Fastlane, Raw, and Smackdown. Plus, I'm joined by my special guest, Chris Morrison of Sportsnet 360. He has a great interview with Drew McIntyre that you can find on YouTube, by the way. We're going to be discussing the legacy in the career of the Olympic gold medalist, the great Kurt Angle.
Your weekly recap.
Maybe it's just me, but it felt as though WWE Fastlane took place weeks ago. In fact, it was just days ago this past Sunday. So let's go over the entire event during the pre-show. They cut to a segment backstage where Carmella was lobbying for R-Truth to gain a rematch. So she walked around the corner with a petition to be signed. Joe eventually signed it and boldly proclaimed he would put everyone to sleep. So Joe, Mysterio, R-Truth, and Andrade got promoted to the main card. Kofi Kingston was called into the McMahon family office regarding the WWE Championship match. Big E and Xavier Woods, they had a match on the pre-show. They defeated Shinsuke Nakamura with Rusev with the up, up, down, down. I enjoyed the near falls, and it turned out to be a pretty solid pre-show match. It's just very troubling to see both Nakamura and Rusev in the spot that they're in at the moment. And as for the New Day, I'm never really concerned about them. They're supporting Kofi Kingston in a major storyline, and they're always perennial title contenders. So, for the main card, the Usos defeated the team of The Miz and Shane McMahon to retain their SmackDown Tag Team Championships. The coast-to-coast spot, impeding on the splash, was very clever. I enjoyed it. and they really laid the babyface Miz on thick since he came out to the ring in Cleveland brown colors. And in case you had forgotten, the Miz is from Cleveland, a fact they reminded us on at least a dozen times throughout this match. Now, following the match, Miz hugged his dad, followed by Shane, but Shane McMahon viciously attacked his now former tag team partner, turning heel in the process. He landed a lot of stiff-looking punches to the head and the body. Then we moved on to Asuka. She retained against Mandy Rose after she got caught in the ring apron, and then she ate a kick to the head. Sonya Deville was basically acting as a distraction throughout. She kept looking under the ring. Again, it proved to be Mandy's undoing since that's what got her caught up. Sonya Deville attempted to sincerely apologize, but Mandy was in no mood to forgive her. Tensions rise. What could happen next? Overall, a very lackluster match to me. Not what Asuka needs heading into WrestleMania. Kofi was seen waiting in front of the McMahon family office after feeling he was being disrespected. Big E and Xavier said, "Not for this." They barged in and they interrupted Vince's phone call. Vince was basically jokingly saying, "I've been waiting for you. Where were you?" So Big E and Xavier, they pleaded with Vince to add Kofi to the match. Surprisingly, Vince easily obliged. He said, "Yeah, you're going to be in the match." He told him to get ready. Your match is next. So I thought, oh, wow, this is great. An unexpected turn for the worse. Because Kofi excitedly made his way to the ring. The crowd was readily behind him. And then suddenly it was announced that the WWE Championship match would be taking place later on in the evening. And then Kofi would be facing the Bar, the dreaded Bar, in a handicap match with both men in the ring at once. Kofi, it's a trap. And as expected, the Bar thoroughly picked him apart, leading to the victory. We've seen this before with Daniel Bryan. They are purposely holding Kofi Kingston down so he can achieve his dream at WrestleMania. I like it. For the record, anything other than that outcome would be a supreme letdown. The Revival, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder defeated the teams of Ricochet and Aleister Black and Bobby Roode and Chad Gable to retain their Raw Tag Team titles. I mean this in the nicest way possible, but it was a demolition derby of a match, one that I thoroughly enjoyed. It really entertained me, and at this point, it was easily match of the night, although it was overthrown a little bit later on. Aleister Black's entire performance offers so much potential on the main roster. From the look, entrance, and in-ring abilities, he has it all. I just wish they would allow him to be their silent assassin. Over to the United States Championship match, Samoa Joe kept it where it belongs against Andrade, R-Truth, and Rey Mysterio in a four-way. The finish occurred when he locked Rey in a very suffocating coquina clutch, which forced Rey Mysterio to pass out rather than tap out. I thought it was a pretty solid match featuring some very creative spots. In my humble opinion, Andrade's stock rose again, perhaps the highest out of anyone despite the losing effort. And as for Joe, he exudes believability. Always convincing, always credible. And in fact, at this point, he deserves a WWE Championship run. Next up, Sasha Banks and Bayley defended their WWE Women's Tag titles against the team of Nia Jax and Tamina. I'll be honest, the match itself was quite clunky and far from polished. Bayley countered Nia's powerbomb attempt into a Hurricanrana pin for the victory. As expected, Nia and Tamina didn't handle the loss very well, so they took it out on both Bayley and Sasha Banks. This led Beth Phoenix, who was on guest commentary, to stand up and get in Tamina's face. This eventually led to the trading of punches, where the numbers advantage was simply too much for Betty Phoenix to overcome. But her best friend Natalya ran down in an effort to bail out her friend, but she was taken out too. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes. Perhaps a three-way or a fatal four-way for the Women's Tag Team Championships, perhaps even featuring the Iconics as well. By the way, did you see Beth's phone fly out of her blazer? I was legitimately worried it was going to be stomped on. Oh, pictures of my dog were there. What are you doing? You're dead. Then, of course, it was Daniel Bryan versus Kevin Owens versus Mustafa Ali. I didn't see that one coming, but I was happy with it. So Ali took the place of Kofi, and boy, did he make up for lost time during that injury. He really rose to the occasion, seized the opportunity. The championship was clearly never meant to change hands here, but Daniel Bryan might just be the most unselfish performer in the industry today. KO's babyface run actually has some legs, and Mustafa Ali offers more upside than virtually any other performer on the main roster. He's young, he's hungry, and he's constantly over-delivering. Keeping Kofi Kingston out of the match only strengthens his momentum heading into WrestleMania, since the crowd was loudly chanting his name throughout. Match of the night by an absolute long shot. Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair. According to Michael Cole, Becky Lynch is a medical miracle. They were really selling her injuries the same way Tony Schiavone sold every episode of Nitro as the best of all time, the greatest night in sports entertainment. Yes, they are stretching it a bit, but I comprehend why. Charlotte's psychology was a little puzzling, though. She toyed with Becky rather than immediately attacking and brutalizing the knee, which is what anybody would have done. As fully anticipated, Ronda Rousey eventually ran out in full black gear. That's WWE's way of indicating she's a heel, brother, and then proceeded to punch Becky. This led to the DQ finish, with Lynch being officially added to the match at WrestleMania. Also, that was very puzzling. Let's ask a very important question here. If Ronda is truly a heel, why would she want to exponentially increase her chances of losing at WrestleMania by adding another person to the match? Also, a few other key takeaways. Becky Lynch's momentum has really stalled, at least in my opinion. Yes, she's still over, gets a great reaction, but what are they doing with her? And also, I strongly suspect Ronda will manage to retain at WrestleMania. If she doesn't, Charlotte will take the pin, Ronda will take some time off, and then rematch with Becky. Should also be noted that Elias somehow took on the role of the musical narrator throughout the evening until he was met with an RKO out of nowhere, but then Randy Orton ate a phenomenal forearm out of nowhere, which almost certainly confirms that Randy Orton and AJ will clash at WrestleMania. Then finally, the main event. Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, and Baron Corbin. The odd pairing there versus The Shield reunited as Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. It was ultimately a very satisfying match, and this led to some very memorable spots all throughout the arena. Seth, I'll jump off anything. Rollins was on full display. Dean Ambrose was more motivated than I've seen in months. The Shield won following their three-man powerbomb spot. Everyone was waiting for Ambrose to turn on Reigns. It never occurred. There's still time until WrestleMania. And then the ring, I gotta know, resembles a slip and slide during every Bobby Lashley match. That man sweats like a politician on trial, profusely. So I entered Fastlane with fairly moderate expectations, and I felt the event over-delivered compared to them. I'm comfortable awarding the card a grade of about a B. I think that that's solid. I think that that's fair. Raw opened with The Shield live from the PPG Arena in Pittsburgh. Well, after they made their entrance, of course, Roman Reigns briefly discussed how life is short, nothing is guaranteed, and that if Sunday was the final time the Shield worked together as a team, it was a true honor. He further noted that he's anxious to wrestle and he wants to pave his own path to WrestleMania. He noted that Ambrose has his own business and he still loves him anyway, and then he put over Seth Rollins. And then, of course, there was a Slay the Beast chant, and then Roman led a Burn It Down chant. Reigns and Ambrose eventually left the ring. All of them hugged each other. Rollins remained in the ring, where he proceeded to cut a promo on Brock Lesnar. This brought out Paul Heyman, and Rollins astutely pointed out that Brock has had a tough time dealing with guys much smaller than him, which prompted Heyman to counter with his lack of preparation time being the reason why it was much more competitive than those matches needed to be, with, of course, Finn Balor, AJ Styles, and Daniel Bryan. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, out of the blue, Shelton Benjamin literally jumped Seth Rollins from behind and proceeded to land 3 beautiful German suplexes. Many tend to forget that Shelton and Brock Lesnar were not only roommates in college, but they also formed a brief tag team in OVW, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Back at it again. Naturally, this led to Seth Rollins versus Shelton Benjamin, a very competitive matchup with Rollins winning via the curb stomp. Shelton Benjamin is arguably one of the most underappreciated wrestlers on the roster. Jim Ross even pointed out on Twitter that in a class with Batista, Cena, Orton, Lesnar, Benjamin was a part of that class too, and he was the most natural athlete of them all. That is super high praise. Finn Balor faced Bobby Lashley for the Intercontinental Championship. Leo Rush made an appearance in a hoodie. He was ringing the bell This distracted Finn, who jumped off the top rope, only to be met with a perfectly timed spear from Lashley. 1, 2, 3. What a surprise. A new Intercontinental Champion. It's Bobby Lashley. A very unexpected and disappointing outcome, if I'm being honest. I fully expected Finn to defend that championship at WrestleMania, but again, nothing's guaranteed. The only thing for sure is nothing's for sure. Then Ronda Rousey. She marched down to the ring minus the usual smiling and waving. Yes, the angry, baddest woman on the planet has emerged from her slumber. Ronda noted that she never forgot about the fans chanting, "You deserve it," after she was brutalized by Charlotte with a kendo stick. She also mentioned how fans should be fortunate that a barricade is blocking them from her, as she would take them out as well too. Probably not advised with the legal department, but nevertheless, Ronda doesn't care if it's a handicap match or a triple threat match, as either way, she will run through both Charlotte and Becky, and then a very unlikely hero emerged to defend the integrity of the WWE Universe. Who was it? Dana Brooke. Are you sure about that, Chris? Yes, no, I am. Dana stated that she has nothing left to lose and that Ronda normally issues an open challenge following pay-per-views. So, my name is Dana Brooke and I accept, is what she said. And I'll give her credit for trying, but as expected, Dana was tossed around like a rag doll and rescued by the referees before succumbing to further damage. Ronda considered locking the armbar, but then told fans to pay $60 to see it instead. Now that's at UFC price point, since the WWE Network is only $9.99. That's a cheap plug. Ricochet and Aleister Black versus Bobby Roode and Chad Gable. I enjoyed the match while it lasted, but it was less than 5 minutes. And let me just point out, the Black Mass is arguably the most effective finishing move in the WWE. It reminds me so much of the DDT. I'm a big Jake Roberts fan, from the perspective that it's simple, yet no one kicks out of it. The perfect exclamation point. The Revival then jumped Ricochet and Aleister Black, which leads me to believe this feud is far from over. Next, Alexa Bliss hosted a Moment of Bliss where she revealed that at WrestleMania, the host will be Alexa Bliss, and she told us, "You're welcome." Backstage, it was revealed that those two SNL hosts, which names escape me this week, from last week, purchased Braun Strowman a really flimsy sports car. So Braun thanked them by ripping off the door, tossing the driver's seat, smashing the windshield with his fist, and then also removing the hood. "This is why we can't have nice things, Braun." Elias appeared on his stool and mentioned that he advised that Anton Brown leave Pittsburgh, which drew plenty of heat since he was the former wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then No Way Jose, who received hair tips from Naomi and obviously feels the glow, made his entrance but quickly ate drift away. Then we were treated to a Lacey Evans appearance where she threw up her fan in front of the face of Renee. Nia and Tamina showed up, crossing paths with Evans. They all shook their heads and carried on. Natalya made her entrance and she announced that her best friend Beth Phoenix would be supporting her. This match barely lasted longer than the flavor of a juicy fruit stick of gum. Beth got involved and forced Nia and Tamina out of the ring. And then once Nia and Tamina made it back to the gorilla position, they were met by fists and knees, courtesy of Sasha Banks and Bayley, the Boston Hug connection, which led to a pull apart. Triple H made his way to the ring and he was ready for a fight. He had the hand tape, the wrist tape, and the leather jacket. So Batista made his entrance with his personal security in tow. Once he spoke, he simply wanted Triple H to give him what he wanted, despite the fact that Triple H quickly pointed out, "That's not happening, my friend. You're not getting what you wanted." Line of the evening, courtesy of Triple H, "I will tear my way through the Guardians of the Independence scene," when referring to the personal security. After screaming at each other for what felt like minutes, Batista clearly requested that he wants him at WrestleMania. Triple H accepted. "Thank you. That's all I ever wanted. One last match to end my career on my terms, and that one last match to end your career on my terms." That was Batista. Great line. Then Triple H quickly pointed out the match itself is on his terms, and it will now be a no-holds-barred match. When they were awkwardly screaming at each other, I should say, I had my doubts about the promo, but ultimately I liked it. Batista came off as a spoiled child. He just wanted his toy to play with now. And once it was promised to him, he was all smiles. Everything's all hunky-dory. Kurt Angle A gentleman I will be speaking about in a matter of moments with my dear good friend Chris Morrison came out to the ring in front of his hometown faithful. He announced that his retirement match will transpire at WrestleMania. The Olympic gold medalist thanked the wrestlers along with the WWE Universe, and he's having one final match in his hometown against Apollo Crews. As expected, Kurt defeated Apollo in a short yet satisfying match with a great conclusion that saw him get his arm raised following the Angle Slam. So this begs the question, who will be Kurt Angle's final opponent? Ideally, it would be great if it were someone he could pass the torch to. Then Roman Reigns entered the ring for his match against Baron Corbin, but he was jumped by Drew McIntyre, who treated him to two very nasty Claymore kicks. A trainer and Seth both ran down to check on Roman, claimed he was fine, sold it as a possible concussion. I liked it. Backstage, Dean Ambrose approached Triple H. He demanded a Falls Count Anywhere match with Drew McIntyre, to which Hunter replied with, "Hell yeah." So then those two made the most out of that stipulation, competing through every corner of the arena. The finish came when McIntyre pulled Ambrose's body through a metal handrail, and it was right beside the announcer table. And then he landed a flawless Claymore kick. Drew McIntyre earned the victory and once again proves he's the most dangerous man on Monday Night Raw. Rather than stay down, Dean Ambrose got back to his feet, but he ate one final Claymore kick for his troubles. It was very reminiscent of an old Western movie. He was the good guy, but he was put out of his misery. If that's the last of Dean Ambrose, he looked great and proved to be one of the MVPs of the show. Over on Team Blue, no Ali shuffle from Shane McMahon as he was all business walking down the ramp, and he was in full heel mode, getting Greg Hamilton to announce him as the best in the world, not once, not twice, but thrice. And Shane berated The Miz and discussed how satisfying it was to choke out The Miz in front of his baked potato-faced father, his words, not mine. McMahon then announced that he will kick The Miz's ass at WrestleMania. Totally wishful thinking, but I was optimistic this match would somehow get scrapped, but I knew ultimately that that was unrealistic and we were going to see it. The Hardys, Ricochet, and Aleister Black versus The Bar, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Rusev. It was a thoroughly entertaining match while it lasted. Then the New Day came out angry, and basically they wanted to purposely gain Vince McMahon's attention by attacking all performers in the ring, especially the heels. Then Randy Orton and AJ Styles shared two of the best promos of their respective careers, and it was together. First, Randy Orton provided us with a very accurate history lesson. Orton said that this is his house that AJ Styles built. Well, back in 2002, AJ was working in high school gyms for $10 a night while Orton made his Smackdown debut. In 2004, Styles was shaking hands in bingo halls while Orton was becoming the youngest ever WWE World Champion. In 2005, AJ was down in Florida working on his tan with Dixie Carter, while Randy was challenging The Undertaker for his streak at WrestleMania 21. And then Orton noted that SmackDown was the house that was built long before AJ Styles ever arrived. And SmackDown was the house that he built. Out came AJ Styles, who pointed out that while Orton is someone who views the Indies in a negative light, he somehow seemed to follow AJ's career very closely. Then AJ noted that guys like Orton were built for the WWE. That's what he always heard. And Orton would have never survived in the Indies. He referred to the RKO as a knockoff diamond cutter. Snap! It's actually kind of true. And then Orton jumped back, stating that's really the pot calling the kettle black, since his friends would have never ripped anyone off, right? Then he proceeded to demonstrate the Wolfpack 2 sweet hand gesture that the club does, right? And as expected, AJ referred to Orton's earning basically a shot in the WWE by simply asking Daddy and depending on Triple H, Batista, and Ric Flair to oversee him. Orton's rebuttal was that he didn't need help to achieve all of his accolades, but then AJ listed off Evolution, Legacy, Rated RKO, and the Wyatt family. Checkmate, although Randy had line of the night. You see, I'm the landlord, and rent's due, you son of a bitch. You can make that rent out to 3 letters, RKO, damn. But then AJ came back with, you want that rent money? Points to the WrestleMania sign. Well, come and take it. Now, Orton did not accept, but this match is definitely happening. And the chemistry between these two is incredible. And you should fully expect their match at WrestleMania to be a potential show stealer. Randy reminds me a lot of Brock Lesnar in the same way that when they are motivated, They deliver, no doubt about it. Sonya Deville and Asuka got weird very quickly. At roughly the 5-minute mark, Asuka hit Mandy with a baseball slide. Mandy then pulled the ring apron in an effort to get up, but this led to Sonya to trip. Reminiscent on what we saw at Fastlane with the roles reversed, then Asuka nailed Deville with a head kick and forced her to tap out to the Asuka lock. And that was that. No apologies there. Becky Lynch appeared in front of the live crowd with 2 good legs for a change. Yeah, she tossed the crutch aside. She doesn't need it anymore. And she noted that all of these suspension shenanigans were done in an effort to get into Ronnie's head. Well, mission accomplished. She didn't even need to win her match against Charlotte because Ronda did her bidding for her. Out came Charlotte, who listed her accomplishments, but then Becky noted that without the man, neither Ronda or Charlotte would be headlining WrestleMania, as she made the division more relevant than ever. That's a fact. And then Becky further mentioned that the division does not need a queen, probably never did, because what it really needed was the man, a literal mic drop. Yeah, she actually dropped the microphone. I thought it was a great segment. Samoa Joe and Andrade versus Rey Mysterio and R-Truth concluded with Rey pulling out the surprise pin on Samoa Joe after reversing a power bomb. And then the main event saw Daniel Bryan and Rowan defeat Mustafa Ali and Kevin Owens. It was Rowan hitting the claw slam on Ali. A very good effort from all 4 men involved. Then, Vincent Kennedy McMahon entered the ring, which also brought out Kofi Kingston and the New Day. Another great line. This one courtesy of Big E and Vince McMahon. Big E said, "This is bigger than Vince's ego," to which Vince stated, "Nothing is justifiably bigger than my ego." After Woods and Big E once again stated their cases, Vince's rebuttal was that while Kofi is a tremendous athlete, he's not championship material, and agreed with Daniel Bryan's assessment that he's a B-plus player, a line that's a throwback to Daniel Bryan's build towards WrestleMania 30. Vince also stated that Kofi would be a WWE Hall of Famer, but alongside the New Day, since they have carried the load. Kofi brought up how blessed he felt to be in the WWE and the fact that he has sacrificed his personal life for the company, including missing key moments from his children's lives. He is not demanding a shot, but simply wants to prove he deserves one. This will definitely come back to haunt him because Kofi has to defeat all of those men in the gauntlet match next week in order to face Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania. They are really stacking the deck against Kofi Kingston, but I fully expect the New Day, AJ, and some others to even the odds next week so Kofi can earn his opportunity. A really solid episode of Smackdown this week. It was the second round of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. The popular duo of Mustache Mountain, one of the favorites to win, actually lost. Yeah, it was a surprise conclusion to the Forgotten Sons. That's Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler. Jackson Ryder got involved. It was a numbers game. So they advance to the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Finals taking place at NXT TakeOver. Then it was Io Shirai versus Bianca Belair in a match to determine the number one contender for Shayna Baszler's NXT Women's Championship. Shayna was on commentary, couldn't resist getting involved. She pulled Io Shirai from the ring, slid in, locked Bianca Belair in a rear naked choke. Kairi Sane came down to try and take out Shayna. That failed. In fact, Shayna took out everybody, so they were all left laying. There was even a boring chant at one point. I don't believe it's boring, but at the same time, it looks like it's going to be a fatal four-way at NXT TakeOver between those 4 women. And then in the main event, Ricochet and Aleister Black taking on the team of DIY, reunited and it feels so good, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. But as the saying goes, all good things must eventually come to an end, because after a well-placed black mass and a 630 splash courtesy of Ricochet, Tommaso Ciampa was pinned 1, 2, 3. Now Johnny Gargano was sitting on the outside of the ring, I believe with a tweaked knee. This prompted his wife Candice LeRae to run out and check on him, and then in a very uncharacteristic move, Tommaso Ciampa took Goldie, placed it down, and then walked Johnny Gargano up the ramp. But deja vu, he saw that LED screen and he attempted to throw Johnny Gargano into it, but Johnny Gargano put his leg down and he was faking the knee injury. And then he threw Tommaso Ciampa into the LED screen and then landed a well-placed super kick right on the jaw. So in the end, Johnny Gargano gets the last laugh, and unfortunately, as we know now, Tommaso Ciampa will not be cleared to compete at NXT TakeOver, which means Johnny Gargano will compete against someone new. And actually, just read the spoilers. I know who it is, but I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to watch NXT television to find out. Up next, I am joined by Sportsnet 360's Chris Morrison as we discuss the incredible career and legacy of the Olympic gold medalist, Kurt Angle.
Our topic of the week.
During the most recent episode of Monday Night Raw, Kurt Angle formally announced that his final professional wrestling match will transpire at WrestleMania 35. Few have ever been better or more accomplished than the Olympic gold medalist, Kurt Angle. And to honor his career, I really wanted to focus on some of his standout career highlights, some of our favorite moments, speculate his WrestleMania 35 opponent, at least in our eyes, and discuss his legacy. I'm joined by Sportsnet 360's Chris Morrison. Chris, if you had to define Kurt Angle in maybe a word or two, what word would you use? Mine would be machine.
Mine would be you suck.
Oh, there you go.
Because I feel like that's fitting, right? That's Kurt Angle, right? I mean, he comes out, we love him. He's arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, professional wrestlers and sports entertainers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But yet, he still comes down to the ring, and even at his, I don't even know how old he is now.
I think he's like 51 or 52. He's up there now. And he's no spring chicken. I mean, he obviously moves around a lot slower. He doesn't look the same in terms of his body, but he can still get in there, as we saw on Monday with Apollo Crews, and still put on a reputable match.
Yeah, so, even at his age and with all the reported neck surgeries, we still chant "You suck," and so comically, that would be the way I will always remember Kurt Angle.
Out of respect, of course. Now,
exactly.
I wanted to bring this up before we get to some of his career highlights. I wanted to go over a few trivia facts that you may or may not know about, along with some of his accolades. And what you just touched on was "You suck." So his entrance theme was actually a modified version of the Patriots. Do you remember that? The Patriot actually had that theme song back in, about 1997. Kurt Angle got it. And then it wasn't until about mid-2001 where fans started to chant the words, "You suck," to the beat of the music. And you can actually thank Edge for that one.
I do remember the Patriot because he wrestled Bret Hart. And it's not the first time that you will hear throughout the history of WWE the recycling of theme musics. I believe it was even like they had like a generic one for the Orient Express, which I feel like a few of the Japanese guys adopted. And they had, there was also that sort of July 4th, like, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, and that was
Tori
like
Wilson
Lex
had
Luger.
one too, I think.
Yeah, so they've had some generic songs, but yeah, I do remember when I heard Kurt Angle come out to that, I thought, yes, the Patriot. And of course, this man is a two-time Olympic gold medalist for the United States of America.
Some other trivia facts. He is among the 4 individuals to compete in amateur wrestling's Grand Slam. That is the Junior Nationals, the NCAA, the World Championships, and of course, the Olympics. His first televised loss was to Taz, of course, and that was at the Royal Rumble in Taz's debut. But actually, that was not his first loss. You want to know who it was against? This will surprise you. It was a dark match against the late, great Owen Hart.
Oh, interesting. I did not know. I was gonna guess like somebody like a Sean Stasiak or something like, or a
Planet
like that,
Stasiak broke the streak of the great Kurt Angle. Could you imagine?
Yeah, that was gonna be my guess. I don't know why I think Sean Stasiak and Kurt Angle. I don't know why. I don't know why I put those two together instantly in my mind.
He was the first ever wrestler to hold the WCW and WWF World Championships during the same calendar year. He also held the Intercontinental, European, and Hardcore Championships, all on separate occasions. And then perhaps most of his accomplishments come down to this. in amateur wrestling. He was inducted into the National Amateur Wrestling Hall of Fame class of 2001, the USA Wrestling Hall of Fame class of 2001, the International Sports Hall of Fame class of 2016. Of course, he's also a WWE and TNA Hall of Famer. But Chris, I'm going to tell you the pinnacle of his success. He starred in Sharknado 2. Wow.
No, you're kidding.
No, he was in
more than one of those.
I think they're on 4 or 5 at this point. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No, Tara Reid's in there. Yeah, there's a name that you haven't heard in a while.
Wow, and all 5 of them?
I don't know. I don't know if she survives 1 or 2.
I think, I mean, this is going to be a great podcast because we're talking about one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. But I mean, the note of all notes, I think, is that they made 5 Sharknado movies.
There you go. Have you even watched any of them?
I saw the first one, just because you have to. I feel like you have to watch it. It's a Sharknado.
Yeah, I remember a time where I forget the guy's name, Mark Geyser. He was the guy that played Zach Morris, and he was in one called like Atomic Hurricane or something like that. And it was like
Mark Paul Gosselaar.
Yeah, but they were just so campy and out there. Same with Sharknado. And I have to admit, even though, yes, they're not technically great movies, I would never rate it anything above like a D. I still would tune in just for the sake of that campy entertainment and the laughter it generates.
Right, and it's original too, and that's one of the things I think Hollywood is lacking, maybe in some cases, or is originality. You always see remakes of movies like A Star Is Born, an Oscar-nominated film. That's a remake. That's a remake of something that was done, I think, in the 50s or something, right? So
Sharknado 5, an Oscar-nominated film. That's where we're heading, Chris.
For originality, yeah.
So we move on from Sharknado. I knew that you would enjoy that. I threw that in there.
Yeah.
To some of the best moments and matches of the entire career of Kurt Angle. And I'm a big Kurt Angle fan. I have so many standout moments and matches from his entire career. It could last an entire podcast. But for the sake of this segment, I actually condensed it down to like probably 12 to 15 moments. That's not bad, actually.
No, that's not bad. I mean, he's the accolades are endless with this guy. So that's impressive in itself.
So I wanted to go through some of these, get your take on them, and obviously see if you wanted to add some in here yourself. But I think his first real big accolade was defeating The Rock to become the WWF World Champion, cementing the greatest rookie year in professional wrestling history.
That's I mean, at that time, what was it in the 2000 year 2000? I think, right?
Yeah. So he debuted 99, later part of 99 there, and then that was into 2000. Into 2000, I should say.
Yeah. So I mean, you're beating one of the hottest, if not the hottest, I mean, arguably stars of that era and possibly in wrestling history, and you're doing that with almost having been in the company for a year. Definitely impressive, to say the least.
Very much so. And then just 1 year after his debut, Angle put forth, in my opinion, the first of many classic WrestleMania matches against Chris Benoit. It was at WrestleMania 17, arguably the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
Yeah, I would put that high on the list of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And I would even go, I mean, if you look down the list of guys that he's beaten, I mean, he's beaten Stone Cold, The Rock, as we mentioned, Chris Benoit. I believe he beat Shawn Michaels as well at a WrestleMania.
He did. We'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, I mean, to say that this guy isn't one of the greatest WWE professional wrestlers of all time, I mean, show me that person and I'll throw a carton of milk in their face.
And we'll get to that shortly too. But how about Kurt Angle versus Shane McMahon? It was King of the Ring 2001. Now, what many tend to forget, Kurt Angle actually competed in 2 matches prior to going one-on-one with Shane. And if you remember it, it was just so incredibly violent. The belly-to-belly suplex, Shane through the glass, and it took multiple attempts to get him there and even throwing him back. Shane McMahon, shooting star press. Kurt Angle slamming Shane McMahon off the top rope. I mean, Kurt Angle was mentioning his tailbone was basically fractured after that match.
Yeah, I remember that, and that's 2 years now. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2 years back to back. It was he was the King of the Ring winner in 2000, I believe, right? And then he's going on to 2001 at the King of the Ring. I had just rewatched that match actually last Friday before heading off to WWE Live, the March to WrestleMania at the Coca-Cola Coliseum. And yeah, the amount of times it took him to get Shane. I mean, it's laughable, but it's but that's just one of the gimmicks that just doesn't want to be a gimmick in professional wrestling. One of the classic things that we all remember. Maybe at the time it was looked at as a botch or something like that because the panel or the glass wasn't giving away. But at the end of the day, you watch it again, and you have a good laugh, but you still realize and you still remember it as one of the most iconic moments in WWE.
Milkamania is running wild. It was following the screw job at SummerSlam 2001. It was Monday Night Raw. Kurt Angle drove out in a milk truck, and he proceeded to drench the Alliance. It was headed by Stone Cold Steve Austin. He said, "How about some good old vitamin D for all of you?"
You know what? I love that moment. And it just adds to the showmanship and the comedic stylings that he brought to WWE. And not a lot of people can say that they can do that. I feel like, Stone Cold and The Rock found a way to get into pop culture. I feel like Kurt Angle just sort of missed that. But it's a shame, though, because he was genius. And
he was.
I mean, I'm one of these types of guys that would say Becky Lynch. I want to see Becky Lynch drive a beer truck to the ring now, I want to see her kind of, because she's taken on that role of a Stone Cold, right?
Rebel without a cause, of course.
Yes, but at the same time, you think about it and you go, man, but would watching her do that, would it work? And for Kurt Angle to be able to mock Stone Cold by driving a milk truck to the ring.
Yeah.
And it works and you laugh. It's like, you're unsure of it now with anybody else doing something that's, references the Attitude Era, which is, a lot of fans think is the best era of all time in professional wrestling. And it might be, but
it's subjective,
it's
right?
Crazy just to think that he did that and it was so successful. Whereas if you look at it now, anybody trying to even come close to even thinking about recreating a moment like that, it would be like, oh, you know what? Let's pump the brakes. This might not be a good idea.
I think it was the right guy. It was the right idea. It was the right timing. And it tied in perfectly because it was something we had seen before, but it morphed from that idea into something we had never seen before. And then he took it out on Stone Cold Steve Austin, which again was totally full circle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it made a ton of sense.
They had that long sort of like trying to impress Vince McMahon thing, the whole campy sing-along in the back. Like, what was it? Stone Cold singing Kumbaya. And then, I forget the song, but Kurt Angle, it was one of those ones you just find yourself sometimes humming for no reason.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Those were some great moments. He put on the cowboy hat and tried to earn the praise and respect of Vincent Kennedy McMahon. I love those moments too. I mean, he was not afraid to basically put himself out there and say, I'm not going to take myself too seriously, but he could flip that switch and be the wrestling machine on any given night.
No, you're 100% right. You flip that switch, you're the guy in the ring that can wrestle for days without stopping. But at the same time, and this is, I think, something that just is lacking from a standpoint nowadays, is the guy that can entertain when he's not in the ring.
Yeah. Well, we look for entertainers, and I do think that they do exist. I mean, as much as people, and I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but as much as people want to say, why is Batista back? It's because he can act. That's why he's back. And if more people put the time in, they put the reps in, and they acted, and they put themselves out there, either did not take themselves too seriously, or took it very seriously to say, how do I get my character over the hump? Maybe they'd be in that spot instead of him.
Yeah, you could be right on that. I mean, like, there's guys like Dolph Ziggler that been trying or doing some stand-up comedy and stuff. So it's a you have to. It's not just. I don't think it's just about wrestling anymore. Or
No.
For a long time, it's been about being able to be an entertainer, a total package.
Well, remember, and we'll get to this a little bit later on, but Kurt Angle said in his Hall of Fame speech that it was about creating moments. And that's something that we don't see all that often, but Kurt Angle created a lot of moments beyond all these matches that we're talking about. We're also mentioning these great moments, but we go from a moment to a match, and it was undoubtedly the greatest singles Royal Rumble match of all time, in my opinion. He squared off against one of his best rivals, Chris Benoit. It was a legitimate 5-star match, which did probably even more for Benoit than it did for Kurt, because Kurt was a solidified guy at that point. He left the ring. Chris Benoit received a standing ovation. I get goosebumps just talking about this match because it was that damn good.
And that was the beginning of, if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of Benoit's sort of run.
It was.
Right? So, and as much as we're praising Kurt Angle for being one of the best wrestlers of all time, I mean, Chris Benoit, I mean, I know they want to erase his name from the history books and from the network because of what happened, but you know what? He was in WCW. He was one of the best wrestlers, just pure wrestlers of all time.
Absolutely legit. That man was a technical wizard. He was fierce. He was vicious in the ring. I can put Chris Benoit, the person, aside, and I can focus on the wrestler, and boy, was he one of the best ever, and he had such a great partner to tango with in Kurt Angle.
Exactly.
How about Team Angle as well, too? Let's take a moment to reflect on them. Shelton Benjamin, Charlie Haas. I loved that threesome there between them because they could beat up anybody in the WWE, and they were all technically very sound in the ring.
Oh, yeah. And even, I mean, I think about that, and I think about, though, lately, the whole Jason Jordan angle, and everybody wanted Chad Gable to be Kurt Angle's son.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this the other day at the WWE live show. I was like, you know what? I think maybe the best thing to not happen was Chad Gable not being Kurt Angle's son. And in fact, Chad Gable now tag teaming with the glorious one, Bobby Roode. You know, we're seeing Shelton Benjamin came back. He came back on Raw and wrestled Seth Rollins.
He did. And I love the tie in there with him and Brock Lesnar because they were actually roommates in college, and they were actually a tag team back in OVW back in the day, too.
Yeah, they were like the Minnesota Wrecking Crew or the Minnesota
indeed.
Stretch Boys or something
the
like
Wrecking
that.
Crew, that's what they were.
Yeah, so, you know, but the Kurt Angle, everybody wanted Chad Gable. And Chad Gable, I mean, you look at Chad Gable now, and you know he came out and he had all the suplex. He looked and kind of acted like Kurt Angle in a way. You know, he was goofy and stuff like that. But no. So
let's move along here. I mentioned his name, and I cannot talk about Kurt Angle without mentioning his name again. It was Brock Lesnar. They had that Iron Man match on Smackdown, but perhaps the most infamous moment between the two was at WrestleMania 19. Despite a broken neck, Kurt Angle squared off against the next big thing to formally pass the torch to him. And that was a tough match for both of them to get through for totally different reasons.
Well, yeah, I mean that match stands out to me, not only because it was in Seattle and I was living on the West Coast at the time, and it was just crazy to me to see, you know, I've always been fascinated about the placement of rings and the entranceways and things like that. So that WrestleMania, and plus that one had, there was like a Limp Bizkit crack addict theme. Limp Bizkit was heavy in WWE at those times. So there was that, and there was the entranceway and just the way it looked. But the fact that Brock Lesnar almost paralyzed himself still sticks with me to this day. That's, take the takeaway from that event. There's two things. There's Vince McMahon doing that rate where he rose, and there's like a kind of like a GIF now where you can see just him coming up.
Oh yeah,
his head poking over the ring apron.
The evil look on his face, right?
And then there's Brock Lesnar almost paralyzing himself trying to do a shooting star press.
Yeah. And of course, there was, Jericho with a low blow on Shawn Michaels. But I digress. It was a great event, one of my all-time favorites. And we move on from an individual that I just mentioned in arguably one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, one of my all-time favorites. I might even put it in the top 3. That highly regarded from me. Kurt Angle submitted the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 21. It was an instant classic. And oddly enough, Chris, this marked the first time they ever stepped in the ring together, and they looked like old dance partners, never missing a beat.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I'm trying to think back now, and the other thing that we got from that was "I'm a Sexy Kurt."
I'll make your ankle hurt.
That'll make your ankle hurt. Yeah, we can't forget that. We can't forget to highlight that. Which he also would sing during his WWE Hall of Fame induction. But yeah, I mean, I can't recall another time that those guys, before or after, ever got into the ring with each other, and the match was amazing. I mean, I can still remember Shawn Michaels being locked in the ankle lock and then trying to like roll through,
Mm-hmm.
but then Kurt Angle would just hold on to it and
The
drag him back.
grapevine, right? He locked in the grapevine, and that was serious business. And then Shawn Michaels was forced to tap out, and many were shocked. But the crowd popped for that one, though. They wanted Kurt Angle to win.
Yeah, and I mean and you just add Shawn Michaels to the list of guys that Kurt Angle made tap,
Yeah.
which is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he basically made everybody tap out when you think about it. And they rematched, and not a lot of people talk about this match, but they rematched at Vengeance. Shawn Michaels, I believe, got the victory there. Very underappreciated match. Go back and watch that one on the WWE Network.
That Vengeance, yeah, okay, I will, because I like I said, I can't remember outside of WrestleMania 21 these guys ever being in the ring against each other.
So moving along, I want to touch on a match, and I don't want to skip over too much, but I would hate myself and never forgive myself if I did not touch on this match, because I believe it was one of the greatest matches of both Kurt Angle's and The Undertaker's career. It was at No Way Out 2006, and it really showed The Undertaker could go, especially because he just got back to that dead man persona. And to that point, he wasn't having the greatest matches in the world, but he went in there with Kurt Angle, and to me, it was a 5-star match. It was that damn good.
The one thing I remember from Kurt Angle and The Undertaker, and this again is just going to go back to the entertainment value that you get with Kurt Angle, was the time where he mocked The Undertaker by riding a scooter.
Yes.
Right when The Undertaker used to ride his Harleys and his motorbikes down to the ring, Kurt Angle. Again, you ask yourself, if anybody ever tried to do something similar to that again, would it work? And I have to say, no, it wouldn't. I feel like he was that special. He being Kurt Angle, pronouns pal, was that special that he could do it. And
he could.
That's why I think he's one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time.
Very understated. I wanted to take a quick moment to point this out. His matches in TNA from about 2006, basically all the way up until he left, were outstanding. A few of the standouts that you can go back and watch, Chris. Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe. As TNA Genesis 2006. That was his first pay-per-view under the TNA banner, plus the rematch at Turning Point. Those two were tailor-made for each other, the epitome of just solid, technical, aggressive wrestling.
Well, TNA for me is where, you lose me with Kurt Angle. I'm a WWE guy through and through. And, if you're leaving WWE, you're kind of leaving my memory.
Sure.
Unless somebody tells me what I should or should not be watching.
Like me, right here.
If you're telling me I need to go back and watch and find Genesis, is it that you said?
TNA Genesis 2006, and then it's Turning Point after that. I'm going to point out a couple others for you I want you to write down. I'll send them to you later. Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles. They competed a lot against each other. Hard Justice 2008.
I had a feeling you were going to say AJ Styles.
Of course, yes. I'm an AJ Styles mark, my boy. But those two had undeniable chemistry. I'm going to throw one out that's going to shock you, and it's not this one, but it's Kurt Angle versus Abyss. That was Turning Point 2008. Here's the one that's going to shock you. This was a technical masterpiece, in my opinion. It was Kurt Angle versus a gentleman by the name of Desmond Wolfe, better known as the great Nigel McGuinness. That was Turning Point 2009. Unfriggin' believable.
Interesting. Okay, I will definitely find there. I'm sure they're on YouTube somewhere.
Oh, of course. And do you want me to throw one out that's going to really shock you? This was in 2015, not that long ago. Kurt Angle, Bobby Lashley on an episode of TNA Impact. Anybody who wants to knock Bobby Lashley, knock him no more. Watch that match, and that man can go, given the right time frame and the right opponent.
Yeah. Anybody wants to knock Bobby Lashley, they can do so from the safety of their couch.
Yes.
Right?
Much larger in person, that's for sure.
Yeah, if you're going to knock a guy, knock him to his face.
So basically, anytime Kurt Angle locked horns with AJ or Samoa Joe, Again, it was just the epitome of entertaining wrestling. To me, some of the best moments in TNA history. So we talked about some of our favorite moments. Quickly, if he is going to indeed retire post WrestleMania 35, who should the final match be with? And I guess we got to think about how it impacts the WWE. I have two names in mind. I want you to go first.
Well, if you had asked me this question last year around Survivor Series, I would have been able to predict the match for Kurt Angle at WrestleMania, because I did in fact predict it was going to be Angle and Ronda against Triple H and Steph. This year, to be honest with you, I have no idea who he is going to wrestle. I mean, if he can't wrestle The Undertaker, if he can't wrestle John Cena,
that's a name.
I don't know who would come back and wrestle Kurt Angle. I mean, The Rock maybe, but even then, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, a month away.
It's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time, like a lot of these big sort of angles, they start at Survivor Series, or at the very latest, the Royal Rumble. So for a month left, Kurt Angle, who's he going to wrestle? I mean, it's got to be somebody. Maybe it's Jason Jordan. I
don't believe he's cleared, but stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah, to me, if it's somebody with a big name, it's just that'll be a complete shock, because you would think that WWE would have already had this, announced, or we would have already seen it started.
Now imagine this: Kurt Angle is known as a very unselfish wrestler. And I think that being Kurt Angle, having that name value, that recognition, being one of the greatest to ever step foot in a wrestling ring, how about he passes the torch to somebody by the name of Johnny Gargano? Imagine those two one-on-one. That's a 5-star match in the making.
Well, I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are probably going to laugh at me for even saying Jason Jordan. But the intention of saying Jason Jordan was, in fact, to imply that he should pass the torch. And I like that. Of
course.
If it's Johnny Gargano, because there's no Ciampa right now.
No,
right? Ciampa's injured.
He's out.
So, and we've seen Gargano debut.
Yep.
On the main roster. It could, now that you mentioned Gargano, maybe a Ricochet. Ooh. But he's in a tag team with Aleister Black. So we'll see if, there's some sort of triple threat tag team match for the Raw tag team titles. But Gargano, and I feel like a lot of people would want to watch that.
Oh, yeah. I think the diehard wrestling fans would, but for those that are not very familiar with Johnny Gargano, you would be if he put on a 5-star performance against the wrestling machine Kurt Angle. And what a way to send him out, too. Going up against a guy who can have a great match with a broomstick, and Johnny Gargano, and has just been constantly delivering match after match.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that if it is Johnny Gargano, and the worry is that the average fan doesn't know, because that's been one of the things which is still crazy to me when people say, the average fan doesn't know who the NXT guys are, still blows my mind.
Give me a break.
That you're a wrestling fan and you don't know who these guys are. But let me ask you this: if it is Johnny Gargano, does it happen on the main show, or does it happen on the pre-show?
It's got to be the main show. You have to send Kurt Angle out on the main show. And I think it's going to be a very emotional moment. I'm not going to lie. Me looking back and reflecting on his career, and I was such a huge Kurt Angle fan all throughout, it does bring me sadness. Joy because he gets to move on to the next chapter in his life, but sadness, and profound sadness at that, because we are losing legitimately one of the all-time greats, and there's not many of them left.
No, and we are very fortunate as fans to have had him come back and be the general manager and be on TV from a week-to-week basis. The one thing I will take away from that, though, is that, he's come back to not the same WWE that he left, not even close, And I think a lot of us, myself included in this, were hoping he would bring a touch, just a sliver, a little touch of that Attitude Era back. And it never really happened. I think there were 1 or 2 episodes where it was kind of like, oh, okay. Some of that comedic, just the banter that he had with Edge and Christian. It didn't have to be, tits and ass and swearing and all that, but just sort of that comedic banter. And we got it a few times on Raw, but then it just sort of died out. And to me, at least, Kurt Angle started to become just a ho-hum, here he comes, the Raw general manager.
So,
and I don't want him to go down like that. I want him to go down, in my mind, the way he does in your mind. And he will, ultimately, as the GOAT, one of the GOATs.
And speaking of which, and I think you've already kind of showed us a peek into what your opinion is going to be, but what is the legacy in a couple of sentences of Kurt Angle?
Well, I'll try and keep this to a couple sentences. Nowadays we have Ronda Rousey and we have Brock Lesnar, and they are MMA stars, not necessarily first. In the case of Brock Lesnar, he was a professional wrestling star, transitioned over, and then has come back. And Ronda Rousey, obviously, her success in the UFC, and she's transitioned over to WWE. We've seen the likes of CM Punk, and we may never see him in a WWE ring again. But I will say, Kurt Angle didn't do, to my knowledge, any UFC or MMA. But for him to be a true wrestler, right? A true professional wrestler, Olympic, and all that, and for him to embrace the WWE and sports entertainment the way he did, and for him to become one of the greatest of all time, I feel like his legacy, like I said, cemented. GOAT, GOAT. I feel like that's one of the most impressive things.
That's amazing, and I totally agree. So here's mine, and I think you'll be anxious to hear this. I believe he's one of the best all-around performers in the history of professional wrestling. I'll take it a step further. From an in-ring perspective, he was virtually unmatched. We can agree with that. He competed in many modern classics. He was a technical wizard with remarkable cardio. He possessed a ton of charisma, along with that rare it factor, which very few possess. He was entertaining on the microphone as both a babyface and a heel. He had a believable look and character, and guess what, Chris? He drew money as well, too, which not everybody can do. Even some of the guys that we love, they check off a lot of boxes. They just sadly did not draw a ton of money. So when I say all of that, I can think of very few outside of Randy Savage who really check off all of those boxes, because you could have some huge names, but there's a couple boxes they don't check off there. He checks them all off.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and as you were saying that, I started to think about that, like even let me even say Stone Cold Steve Austin, because yes, he checked off, being one of the most popular wrestlers of all time, the crossover, the t-shirt sales, but were his matches as great as they were as his matches were in WCW? I would say no, and that's an obvious no, because of the neck injury that he suffered when Owen Hart gave him that reverse pile driver. I don't know what you want to call it. But, that's why I speak so highly of a guy like Kurt Angle, because even with the injuries, he still put on, the neck injuries, still put on amazing matches. And then good or bad, he was super entertaining on the mic. And you wanted to watch the matches he was in. So that's why I put him up. And that's why I agree with a lot of the things you just stated. And that's why I put him up as one of the best of all time.
Now, if the WWE...
can't forget him.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, no, you can't forget about that. I think it's great, the fact that people are starting to recognize this and really chat about it in a legitimate way when they're building those lists, and they think, no, he should be up there, definitely. And if the WWE was wise, you know what they should do next? They have a little territory by the name of NXT. And they would greatly benefit by having a guy like that, who lives in Florida, by the way, go down and do some coaching.
Oh, yeah. You could have him down at NXT. You could have him go fly across the sea and go over to NXT, the UK NXT,
definitely,
and help out those guys as well. They've got some really talented guys over there. I've been watching a few of those UK NXT episodes. Those are really entertaining.
They're
as
legit.
Well. I would be shocked if Kurt Angle wasn't somehow associated with WWE NXT after WrestleMania.
A wise decision to keep him in there. So, Chris, thanks for joining me as we focused and really just took a moment to praise the greatness of Kurt Angle ahead of his match at WrestleMania 35. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to who the opponent is. And again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, always a pleasure. I love coming on and talking wrestling with you. Hopefully, I'll be back soon.
You're listening to The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
Always a pleasure when Chris Morrison joins the program. I could have gone on for hours about the legacy and the incredible career of Kurt Angle. That's what's so great about his body of work. This weekend is St. Patrick's Day, so if you do happen to enjoy a pint, don't drink and drive. And until next Thursday, happy trails to you until we meet again.
This concludes another episode of The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. For new episodes, subscribe on YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or iTunes. And don't forget to follow The Signature Spot on Facebook for exclusive clips, polls, and opinions.